Today, we journey deep into the battlefields of the First World War, exploring the stories of ordinary soldiers who faced extraordinary horrors, endured unimaginable hardships, and displayed courage that history barely remembers. This is the story of survival, friendship, and sacrifice in a war that changed the world forever. In the early months of 1916, Europe was engulfed in the chaos of trench warfare. Endless lines of mud, barbed wire, and shattered earth stretched across Belgium and northern France. Among the new recruits was Edward Eddie Foster, a young man of 19 from a small English town. Bright-eyed and eager to serve, he imagined war as a place of glory. But the moment he stepped into the trenches, he realized that war was something else, entirely a living nightmare of mud, rats, and the constant threat of death. Eddie quickly met Captain Arthur Blake, a battle-hardened officer in his late 20s. Arthur had seen too many young soldiers fall, and his calm, authoritative presence became a lifeline for those around him. He took Eddie under his wing, teaching him the ways of trench life, how to avoid snipers, identify artillery patterns, and survive the endless mud and cold. Together, they shared stories of home fields, of green, roaring fireplaces, mothers' voices Andes. Memories became their small pockets of hope amidst the despair. Life in the trenches was grueling. Soldiers faced hunger, disease, frostbite, and the ever-present smell of decay. Nights were the most terrifying. The silence would stretch for hours, broken only by distant artillery, the whining of bullets, and the screams of men caught in shell fire. Eddie kept a small leather notebook, writing letters he would never send, sketching scenes of the battlefield, and documenting the faces of the men around him. It became his anchor, a piece of humanity in a world consumed by death. By the spring of 1917, the battalion was moved to the Somme, a stretch of battlefield notorious for its devastation. The attack was massive. Thousands of soldiers advancing across no man's land under a sky lit with shells and flares. Eddie was terrified, but Arthur's presence gave him strength. As they crawled through mud and barbed wire, Eddie witnessed men falling around him. He realized that survival was not just about skill, it was about luck, timing, and determination. During one particularly harrowing assault, Eddie saved a young private named Samuel Sam Harris, who had been trapped in barbed wire under enemy fire. With bullets whizzing past, Eddie dragged him to safety, their hearts pounding and lungs burning. That moment cemented a bond between them that would last through every subsequent battle. Eddie realized that war was not just about fighting, it was about protecting one another, carrying each other through despair months passed. The unit endured relentless attacks, sometimes advancing only a few meters at great cost. Soldiers began to break under the strain, their morale battered by losses and exhaustion. Yet amidst the chaos, Eddie found moments of humanity. He shared food with the wounded, listened to the stories of older soldiers, and comforted men far from home. Captain Arthur Blake often spoke about the importance of remembering that each man had a story, a family, a life that deserved respect. In the summer of 1917, the battalion was tasked with defending a key strategic position against a German offensive. The night before the attack, Eddie sat with Sam and Arthur, writing letters and recording thoughts in his notebook. He imagined a world beyond the trenches, a peaceful countryside, the smell of baking bread, the laughter of children. Arthur smiled at him and said, "Keep these memories alive, Eddie." There, what make us human? The next morning, the bombardment began. Shells tore through the air, the ground shook violently, and the men clung to whatever cover they could find. Eddie crawled through mud and debris, carrying wounded men to safety, while Arthur led counterattacks that saved countless lives. The battles dragged on, one after another. Eddie and Sam survived by relying on each other, learning the patterns of artillery, the hidden dangers of trenches, and the human instincts needed to endure. They witnessed acts of heroism and cowardice, moments of laughter amidst death, and the terrible costs of war on young bodies and minds. Each night, Eddie wrote, sketching what he saw, preserving the memory of fallen comrades. In the autumn of 1917, the battalion was assigned to a covert reconnaissance mission. The task was dangerous: cross enemy lines, gather intelligence, and return without alerting the Germans. Eddie, Arthur, and a small team moved under the cover of darkness, crawling through shattered villages and avoiding patrols. Every sound was amplified. A snapping twig, the faint rustle of fabric, the distant barking of a dog. The mission was tense, and fear was constant. Eddie recorded everything in his notebook, aware that even small details could save lives. The mission ended successfully, but not without sacrifice. One soldier was killed, and another severely wounded. Eddie carried the wounded back to safety, his hands slick with mud and blood. That night, he sat alone by a flickering lantern, staring at the pages of his notebook. He realized that survival carried guilt, that each day lived was a reminder of those who had fallen. Yet he also recognized the resilience of the human spirit, the bonds forged in fire and mud, and the courage that ordinary men could display under extraordinary circumstances. Winter came, bringing frostbite, scarcity of supplies, and an endless struggle against the elements. Soldiers huddled together in trenches, sharing warmth and hope. Eddie became known among his peers for his sketches and writings, small pieces of art and documentation that reminded men of life beyond the battlefield. Arthur encouraged him to continue, saying that these records would tell the world what the soldiers endured and how they fought. In early 1918, the battalion faced another massive offensive. The Germans launched attacks with renewed ferocity, and the trenches became a battlefield of fire and mud. Eddie and Sam fought side by side, rescuing comrades, carrying messages across no man's land, and witnessing the bravery and fragility of human life. The battles were relentless, and every day brought new challenges and losses. Yet Eddie persisted, driven by the promise to record every moment, every heroism, and every tragedy. The war began to wind down. By late 1918, Eddie's unit had survived countless battles, lost friends, and endured horrors that would leave scars for life. When the armistice was announced, Eddie stepped out of the trenches into a quiet, peaceful world. The landscape was alien compared to the chaos he had known. Flowers bloomed where shells had torn the earth apart, and sunlight warmed faces that had known only mud and fear. Eddie carried his notebook everywhere, filled with sketches, letters, and observations. It was a testament to survival, memory, and the humanity that persisted even in the worst of times. Returning home, Eddie was welcomed by family and neighbors, but he could not forget the trenches, the faces of fallen friends, or the sacrifices made. He shared his notebooks with historians, schools, and fellow veterans, ensuring that the stories of bravery, friendship, and endurance would not be lost. Over time, Eddie became a quiet legend, a man who had lived through the horrors of war and preserved its human stories for generations. Years later, Eddie's writings inspired new generations to remember the First World. War not only is a conflict of nations, but is a series of personal stories of courage, fear, and sacrifice. His sketches and letters captured the essence of humanity in war, preserving the voices of the forgotten soldiers who gave everything in service to their countries. This story reminds us that history is not just a record of dates and battles, but a collection of human experiences, struggles, and triumphs. The soldiers of World War I fought, suffered, and survived, and through their stories, we understand the true cost of war, the value of courage, and the importance of remembering those who gave their lives. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share to honor the countless untold tales of World War I. Every soldier had a story, and every story deserves to be remembered.